On this episode, we talk with legendary journalist and war correspondent Denis Gray about his new memoir.
So if you want to peek into the life of a true adventurer as he covers some of the biggest stories this century, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to find myself. Turns out that was easy. I was in Thailand. But what I didn't find was the desire to leave.
Ooh, that was clever. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract over 25 years ago, fell in love with ordering pad Thai like a boss until I realized Thais don't actually consider that their national dish. So I never left.
It's like you'll have the pad Thai and you expect everyone to be like, he did it. Lifting you up on their shoulders.
He's so Thai. He's so Thai. He understands our culture.
He gets it. He gets us.
And then 5 years later, I learned it's about the fourth or fifth favorite dish.
Yeah, I don't know.
We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, a heads up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about the reason why I was unable to host last week's show and why I'm recording this episode in Cleveland, Ohio, at the end of an emotional and stressful week, and Greg's eventful holiday weekend, which saw him visiting Goh Samet in the noisiest room imaginable and experiencing the one thing he had hoped to avoid in Thailand, a car accident, which thankfully was just a fender bender. To learn how to become a patron and get all this good stuff, plus full access to over 800 bonus and regular back episodes, click the support button at the top of our website.
That's right. And as always, if you have a comment, a show idea, or just want to say hi, head to BangkokPodcast.com, click the little microphone button on the bottom right, and leave us a voicemail that we'll play on the show. All right, then. Well, in this episode, we chat with a legendary foreign correspondent whose career has spanned more than 5 decades and some of the most consequential events of the modern era. Reporting for the Associated Press, Denis Gray covered the Vietnam War, the fall of Cambodia to the Khmer Rouge, conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, and the Balkans, and countless stories across Asia. He was born in wartime Czechoslovakia. He escaped communist Europe with his family, studied at Yale, served as a U.S. Army captain, and eventually made Thailand his home, where he has lived since 1975. Now, Ed, this is one of those guys that whose bio makes you and me look like little pipsqueak cream puffs by comparison.
No doubt, no doubt.
He has gone from battlefields and refugee camps to royal palaces and remote jungles, documenting not only history's biggest events, but also the resilience and humanity of the people caught up in them. His new memoir, Lost Horizons, covers all of this craziness in detail and goes deep into what it means to live and thrive in a rapidly changing world. So here is my very interesting interview with Denis Gray. All right, we are happy to have on the show someone that I'm sure that I've met, but I can't remember where. Our Venn diagrams of friends and colleagues and associates overlap almost completely, but I don't remember ever meeting this guy, but I'm going to change that in the future. We're talking, of course, about Denis Gray. Denis, welcome to the Bangkok Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
It's great to have you on. I know you are a very well-regarded, well-read, well-written, well-whatever journalist in Southeast Asia, and you are I don't want to say dying breed, but guys like you, they don't make them anymore. It's cheesy to say, but you've sort of seen it all, done it all, been everywhere, and have a hell of a story to tell, which is what we're talking about. And you've got a book that looks fascinating. I'm looking forward to reading. So the book is called Lost Horizons, A Foreign Correspondent's Extraordinary Life Story. So Denis, tell us a little bit about Denis. Where did you come from and how did you end up in Asia?
Well, it's a long story, and part of it is exciting, part of it is a bit boring. But anyway, I was born in the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia as it was then called, and because the communists had taken over our country, my family had to flee. My father was in politics, anti-communist politics, so he had to escape. So our family fled across the Iron Curtain, what was then the Iron Curtain, and lived in Germany for quite a while. And the reason we lived in Germany, because my father, when he escaped, he was sort of well known because he was a young rising politician in Czechoslovakia. So more or less after we crossed the border, he was hired by the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, to work as an agent. So that was our time in Germany. After that, we moved to a number of different countries, first because of the CIA, and number two, my father eventually left the agency and joined IBM. So we moved around. We moved in Germany, went back to the United States. We lived in South Africa. We lived in Paris. And then finally in the United States. In the United States, I went to university at Yale. And after that, unlike a lot of my colleagues at Yale, I actually volunteered for the Army. And sure enough, I was sent overseas to Asia, and first to Japan, which I fell in love with. That was my first sort of Asian experience. Fell in love with Asia at the time. And then the Army did send me to Vietnam eventually, and I was in the Vietnam War for a year before returning to civilian life in the United States.
So they sent you right over during the Vietnam War.
Right. Well, it wasn't right in the middle of the war. Actually, it was in a way a bad time to send me there because the American phase of the war was more or less ending, was winding down. The American troops were sort of at their last, conducting some of their last campaigns. So I had actually a rough job in Vietnam, not so much the danger, but the idea that I had to lead some men, and they all knew that the war was over. And of course, they didn't want to be killed. They wanted to have a nice, remaining months that they had in Vietnam and return home safe in body. So it wasn't an easy task I was a captain at that time.
So, well, all that moving around must have left its mark on you, especially your mark in Asia, I guess. So after you went back to the States, then eventually you made your way back to Asia, which is where you still are today.
Right. Well, then when I went back to the States, I didn't know what I would do with my life, frankly. The 3 years in the Army had sort of thrown me off balance, I guess. But I decided for different reasons that the journalism might be the thing. I enjoyed writing. I loved writing, in fact. And I enjoyed working overseas, the taste I had both in Europe and in Asia. So I eventually it was difficult at that time. They weren't hiring too many journalists, but I eventually, luckily, got a job with the Associated Press in all places, Albany, New York.
Okay.
And not a bad place, but it was a bit different from Vietnam and Japan.
I bet. Yeah. And then your career eventually got you back here. How did that happen?
Right. Well, that happened. I was there in Albany for about a year, and I learned the basics of the trade. I had never written a line of journalism in my life, so I had to start from scratch. And the AP was a great boot camp for teaching guys like me about the trade. So I survived a year, and because I had a military experience, at that time the AP was looking for people who volunteered to go to Vietnam to cover the war. And since I had that experience, normally you'd have to stay in America for a couple of years before they send you overseas. But because of that was a sort of a lucky break. They shipped me right back to Vietnam. And there I was. My first major assignment with the AP was covering the Vietnam. It was more than Vietnam. It was Indochina, covering Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos.
Wow. And that must have been an insane time to be there because everything was different, I imagine. I can't even imagine the challenges facing the people, the politics, the economies, and things like that.
Obviously, the war had been going on for quite some time, and this was sort of in fact, the last gasp of Indochina under non-communist rule. So extremely difficult and dangerous, and I also had a lot to learn too because I'd covered some stuff in Albany like basketball scores and the latest scandals down at the Albany State Bureau. But this was a different kind of thing, and a different kind of deadlines and different kind of situations to cope with. So Yes, it was, especially the first few months were rather difficult for me.
How long did you stay in the region doing that?
Well, I came over in 1973, and my last assignment in Indochina was April 1975, when the communist victories in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos occurred, and I moved myself or the AP moved me, excuse me, the AP moved me to Bangkok. So that was my introduction to Thailand.
In 1975.
Right, exactly. April 18th, 1975.
Wow, I don't want to date either of us, but I was 2 months old then. So, man, that is old school.
Please don't make me look so old.
Wow. So, and you've been, I mean, that was when the Khmer Rouge were in action too, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, in April, the Khmer Rouge scored a victory against the government and took over all of Cambodia, and we're there for this reign of terror, which lasted until the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia and ousted the Khmer Rouge in 1979. A horrific, an absolutely horrific, indescribable time for the Cambodians during that period.
Yeah. No. What was your involvement in that? Did you cover that at all?
Well, yes and no. None of us journalists were allowed into Cambodia by the Khmer Rouge, and obviously we didn't want to go in there secretly. We obviously would have been captured and killed. So the way that most journalists, including myself and the AP and all my other colleagues, we covered it often from Bangkok, because that was sort of the closest point, by various means, listening to the radios coming out of the propaganda, the news radios from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, and by going to the Thai-Cambodian border and talking to refugees who were, of course, fleeing this horror, this hell that was occurring in their homeland. So it was difficult, but we had, journalists have to find a way to cover these stories, even if they don't have a sort of face-to-face encounter with them. So we try to do our best, and as I said, the combination of different things. And of course, there were some sources that we had, like, for example, the CIA and some diplomats who had other means of finding out information. So it was a hodgepodge of things we had to do in order to try as hard as we could to get a picture of what was happening inside Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos too.
Wow, man, that must have been an intense time. It's what fascinates me about the Khmer Rouge and the whole Cambodian genocide thing is just sort of how limited the knowledge about it is. And I'm reminded of in sort of the wider world, and I'm reminded of a story. This was 15 years ago now. A friend was showing some new employees, new colleagues around his work. And it was, these were well-educated, university level, two women who came to Asia to work in this fairly high profile role in this organization. And he mentioned the Khmer Rouge, and they said, "What's that?" And he said, the genocide that happened in Cambodia, like a couple of 100 kilometers from here. And he said that their response was so Valley Girl, it was shut up. Like they just didn't have any idea about it. And it kind of has always mystified me why this isn't, I guess it's overshadowed by, the Holocaust of World War II and things like that. But these things don't seem to break out too much out of the sphere of Asia or the immediate vicinity or people who are invested in reporting about it or writing about it.
Well, I think to an extent you're right. I mean, if you ask people today, especially in uneducated America, they would you have to ask them about even the Vietnam War, and they would have a puzzled look on their face. Not everybody, of course, but many. And certainly Cambodia, where's Cambodia? I mean, believe it or not, these are not educated people now, but sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say uneducated, but people that don't know much about Asia anyway. Sometimes I get this query, do you live in Taiwan now? They get Taiwan and Thailand mixed up, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the extreme. That's the extreme. But I'll tell you why, one reason, or many reasons why Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge weren't that much in the international focus spotlight. Number one, there was no access during the Khmer Rouge period, right? And to get people's attention, you need visual stuff. You need photographs. You need video. And that just wasn't coming out of Cambodia. So at that time. Now later, of course, more stuff came out. Books came out, quite a few good, outstanding books about Cambodia. There were some programs on Cambodia. There was one fantastic movie which won Oscars, The Killing Fields, which is about Cambodia.
Sure.
And that sort of sparked some attention. But overall, you're right, and that's one of the themes of my book, is that the Cambodian War is largely forgotten in a general sense.
Oh, interesting. There's a concept that I first heard about when I was listening to some podcasts on ancient Rome, which I'm a nerd about. And I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but it's a period of time that the Romans and the Byzantines called a saeculum, S8.E47. And basically it's the period of time between when something major happens and the death of the last person who was old enough to remember it. So right now we're sort of approaching or are amidst the saeculum for World War II. So there's not really any World War II veterans left anymore. The people that really fought and managed and experienced World War II are very rare. And so I think we're starting to see that now. We're starting to see people forgetting the lessons learned and forgetting the hard fought truths that came out of things like that, because there's no people left anymore to continue that, or that firsthand knowledge to continue that education. You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. That generation is almost all gone. And the Korean War, that's largely forgotten too, those veterans. And sadly, for all of my colleagues, a lot of my Vietnam era colleagues have already passed away, and some probably don't have many more. Certainly another 2 decades, they'll all be gone. So you're absolutely right. Yeah. It's a very sad thing, but that's the fate of us human species, I guess.
Well, luckily, some people like you are leaving their mark by writing books and things like that. So that's
I think that's the only thing, and that's one reason why I wrote the book, because I wanted to preserve the memory of some of the people who I knew or who I lost, and some of the brave and that are no longer with us. I mean, even in America, I hate to bring up politics, but even in America, some people, including our wonderful president, Mr. Trump, are vague about the Pearl Harbor. I mean, Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor. Believe me, if you asked, 1,000 Americans, what is Pearl Harbor? What significance Pearl Harbor has? I bet a lot of them wouldn't be able to answer. So memories fade. Education systems perhaps aren't as good as they should be, especially when teaching history.
Yeah, man, I only wish I was excited about history in high school as I am now. I would have been an ace student, but I don't know what it is about kids. I guess they just glaze over when they start learning about it.
Yeah, often they have very bad teachers, so they get put off by history.
True. So tell me about the book then, Lost Horizons. I mean, how did it come together, and what's sort of the story behind it, and what are you trying to do with it?
Well, for many years, people have asked me, you've had an interesting life. You should write about it. And I was very busy at the time, very busy with the AP, also going all over the place and so on. So, but when I retired, I'm sort of semi-retired now, I had plenty of time to think about it. And I looked over my life, I read my diaries, and I realized perhaps there was something that would be of interest to maybe perhaps quite a few people. So that started me thinking about it. And I try to bring out a few themes in my life which might be relevant. And one it's a common theme of all humanity, this idea of love and loss, the people and places we loved and the places and people we lost. So that was one of the sort of seminal ideas for the book, and which is, if you do read the book, that theme carries over throughout almost every chapter of the book. Not only there's a lot of my book about wars, but the loss is not always in the wars. It's always in a very, very different setting as well. So that was one of the themes. And I guess the second theme was in my life was this idea that I've always had because of my early years, I had always had this feeling of wanting to, not to hibernate, but to find a place of refuge where my life would be stable, wouldn't be too much change. And on the other hand, I also had this quest or desire for excitement and action, again, because I moved around so much. So that was another conflicting theme. So I guess those two themes are the themes of my book: love and loss, and the conflict within me between finding lost horizons, as it were, and then seeking excitement, and especially the excitement that one does have in wars, sadly.
Yeah, yeah. I was just back in Canada with my son who's 11, and he was talking like, you think we could ever come move back here? And we were talking about the things that he liked about Canada versus the things he liked about Asia. And we were talking about this exact same thing. Like, Canada is really nice, and it's a first world country, and it's rich, blah blah blah. Its sidewalks are even with no potholes. But it's very predictable. And I think that him and I sort of agreed that Asia / Bangkok is that nice sort of refreshing discombobulation, that chaos, that unpredictability that some people, not everyone, but some people sort of thrive on and find comforting and exciting. So that's what I told them. That's why I live in Asia. That's why I told him that. And I said, for you, that sort of sense of excitement might come from moving back to Canada when you're old. But that's why I'm in Asia anyway. So that was an interesting conversation with him.
Very, very relevant. Again, also to me, I was talking about the excitement of war, but that's only one part of it. A lot of it, the excitement, and the reason I stayed in Asia initially was exactly what you described. There is a bit of, especially when you go to places like India or Bangladesh, but Thailand as well. There is this little bit of chaos, living a little bit on the edge. You don't know exactly what's going to happen the next day. So that's definitely also part of it. It's not just the visceral, the excitement of of going to a war.
Yeah. Yeah, it might even be just the little bit of excitement you get sitting on the back of a motorcycle taxi. That's still pretty cool for me.
Right, and hoping you'll survive, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it seems that the journalism profession is kind of a really good fit for you. I mean, the story you told about when you were a kid and how many, I don't know how many countries you've lived in, a dozen. This sort of I don't know if itinerant is the right word, and many negative connotations with that, but you've moved around so much and you've seen so much, and that seems like a history tailor-made for being a journalist. So I'm not sure if it was, accidental that you happened into it, or you just that played a role in what drew you to it. What do you think?
Well, as I said, that's exactly what you said. That's quite true. But the reason I went into it, as I said, after the Vietnam War, I had no idea. I thought maybe diplomacy, maybe teaching, maybe I thought about journalism, but that was just one of several things I thought I might want to do. But the real reason I chose journalism, believe it or not, was actually when I was in the military in Vietnam, and that was at that time there was a ambassador there, Ellsworth Bunker, the U.S. ambassador to Vietnam at the time, very sort of aristocratic guy, very good diplomat. And he had happened to go to Yale. So he had this idea, why don't I look at this, find out any people who had gone to Yale, they're now in Vietnam, either in the military or civilian status. So he actually rounded all of us up. I don't know how he found us. And he had a very nice reception at the embassy. So myself, I came in my jungle fatigues. Other came dressed beautifully. And the reason I mention this is because at that reception, I met several journalists, American journalists, and also one or two foreign ones, who were in Vietnam covering the war. And the way they explained it, I thought these people are really trying to tell what's really happening. Because I knew the other side, the propaganda side myself, and I was part of it. I was in the military. But these people are really trying to dig below the surface, dig below the propaganda, dig below the difficulties of operating in such a situation. And they're really trying to tell the truth. That really impressed me tremendously. And I think I decided to go into journalism from that moment. And so when I came back from the war, and I immediately started looking for jobs in journalism.
You've kind of, I know I'm putting words in your mouth here, but it seems to me that your perspective might be one of like pre-war, post-war, pre-war Asia, post-war Asia, and whatever this is, modern Asia, I guess you could say 21st century Asia. What is your take on sort of those eras in Asia and how things have changed? Where do you see it in the past, and where do you see yourself? Like, where is Denis right now in the story of Asia? What's going on?
Well, it's sort of complicated, but I first came to Asia, I guess would be in 1960, was it 69? I guess in Japan, to Japan, my military service in Japan. And since then, with very brief time in America, I've been in Asia ever since. So obviously, since let's say late 1960s until 2026, I mean, you don't need to
Wow.
be a scholar. You don't need to be anybody to know that the changes have been absolutely, absolutely astounding and amazing, for good,
Yeah.
and not so good. So I have
Right.
obviously seen a huge amount of change in Thailand, which is my home now and has been for a long, long time, and other parts of Asia, even more remote places like, Nepal and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and so on. So tremendous changes, and it's been. I've seen the benefits. I've seen people who were in the 1970s were starving, had no access to medical treatment, and now go to a hospital, can have maybe perhaps not a great life, but a very decent life. So there have been many positive changes. But also, when you get older, you're also nostalgic about some of the wonderful things have now disappeared from Asia totally. The bygone Asia, as I knew it in the 70s, is gone. The architecture, the cities have changed totally. Rural areas have changed. People, of course, have also changed with the changes. So it's a negative and a positive thing for me. And as you get older, I guess you get more and more nostalgic.
Nostalgic and bitter in my case, but yeah, it can be jaded.
And bitter too. Yes, some of the changes have been awful. I mean, let's face it, awful.
So you've lived in Thailand for a long, long time, and you consider this your home. What was it that made you settle down here, especially after a life where you saw so much and went so many places? And let's talk about Thailand a little bit. What about it comforts you?
Well, I mean, as I said, after the communists took over the three countries of Indochina, AP sent me to Bangkok. I had no choice about that. So I stayed in Bangkok for a little bit. And then they almost your story. I thought to myself, well, the AP will keep me here for a year or two. It's a great place. I loved Bangkok from the very go. It was still a tropical city. There were no high skyscrapers. People were very sweet. The traffic was already there, but not that much. So I said, hey, this is a great place. People obviously very, very friendly. So I said, well, maybe I'll stay for a year or two, and maybe 2 or 3. And then, like with you, I said, well, after 3 years, hey, this is a really good place. And where do I want to go? Do I want to go to Europe? Yes, I thought about Europe because I still have close, emotional ties to Europe and cultural ties to Europe. But then I thought, again, we discussed it before, I love Europe. I love going there to the opera. I love seeing the old places. But let's face it, it's pretty boring. If they send me to Europe, I'd be covering press conferences. I'd be covering a strike, Volkswagen strikes. I'd be covering pretty dull things. Here I've got a lot of exciting places, and out of Bangkok, the AP sent me all over the world. So why the hell should I change? This is great. I've got both worlds, so why not? So
Exactly.
And then it went on and on and on, and eventually I said, well, I think this is the place for me.
Right. Yeah. That's it, isn't it? That's what we say all the time. It's you can get a Starbucks in the morning and a croissant, and then in the afternoon be out, in the rice fields,
right,
next to a water buffalo or
That's
something.
right.
So.
Hey, by the way, I never go to Starbucks. I think the coffee, especially in Chiang Mai, is 10 times better and half the price of Starbucks.
Yeah. It's hard to argue with that. Yeah.
That just an interjection there, but
I'm looking at the press kit for your book, and I haven't got the book yet, but there's some wonderful pictures in here. There's a picture of you as a young lad in Paris, and there's pictures of the war in Vietnam and you in northern Thailand with refugee children. And what was the most enjoyable, interesting part of the book to write for you? Any particular stories or chapters stand out?
Well, I think 2 things. I mean, the most enjoyable, I would say, would be the chapter on Paris in the 1960s, which I thought Paris in the 1960s. Again, this idea of change. Paris is still great. I'm going there in the fall, but it's not Paris in the 1960s for many, many reasons I want to go into. So, but that was also my youth. I was 18, 19 and all that. So, and it's also the place I first fell in love with as somebody, really fell in love. So that that part was very, very enjoyable to write. The most difficult part was obviously Cambodia. No question about it. Very difficult for me to write the chapter on the war and then the aftermath, the Khmer Rouge aftermath. So because I lost so many of I would say the bravest men I've ever known.
Yeah, I imagine that would be very hard to write about.
So that was difficult.
Well, before we were recording, we were talking a little bit about what people don't get about Asia and the difficulties in sort of explaining it to people. And as we're wrapping up here, before we get into where people can find the book, like what do you think for the future holds for Asia? Any predictions about
I can answer anything but that one, but I don't know. Well, we all hope for the best, but as we all know, there are many clouds on the horizon. Hopefully the storm will never break, but I mean, just a few things. Of course, another place I fell in love with was Burma, and we all know what's happening to Burma now, and I just can't foresee any great future, at least in my lifetime, for Burma. I hope I'm wrong. I just don't see it. Obviously, China is a very, very difficult thing to predict, but we all know that it's going to be a huge, major power in our region in Asia. Perhaps not always for the worst, but sometimes definitely for the worst. So I don't know. Very difficult. For Thailand, I hope it maintains its great virtues, and I hope it doesn't adopt some of the vices that we find elsewhere in the world. But in journalism, I've always been very loath to predict things because I found quite often so many pundits, and journalists too, talk about something and then predict something, and then 2 or 3 years later, it just doesn't happen. Something perhaps totally different occurs. So I've always been reluctant as a journalist, and that maybe carries over into my my makeup, is that I don't like to predict because I've seen so many things, including my own, not predictions that I wrote about, predictions I thought would happen, proved to be totally wrong. So I'm very reluctant, but we all hope for the best. We love Asia, and we all hope and pray, if we're religious, for the very best. It's been a wonderful home to me, and I've had so many wonderful experiences, so many wonderful friends I've met here. And so the only thing I can wish for them, especially the younger generation that's coming up, that they experience some of the joys that I've experienced in my time in Asia.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think you and I can sort of agree we're coming from the same place. And this is why we started the podcast, is because, there's so much more to Asia, and in our case, Bangkok, but for you, you've covered all over the place here. There's so much more here than the stereotypes and the sort of scratching the surface that you see in the West. And there's so much misunderstanding. And I think it's just, we have to encourage people to continue coming over here and exploring and finding out the magic on their own, and to have their own adventures, their own ways. But you don't do that if you're just sitting at home in front of the PlayStation 5 all day.
Right. Absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Well, let's, where do people find the book? And tell us more.
Well, I mean, it's very, in most of Asia now, it's available in most bookstores, including bookstores in Thailand, Asia Books in Kinokuniya here, and even in Chiang Mai, in Suriwong, it's available. And if it's not available, if they run out of stock, which sometimes they do, these days you can always order from any of these bookstores. They'll ship it to you online. Any Amazon in the world will have it. And so I think it'll be very easy to get if you're interested in the book.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. And you had a very successful release at the FCC in Bangkok recently, which I was unable to attend because I was in Canada.
Yeah, it was really great. And the reason I really found it really wonderful is that sometimes when these things happen, you get some pretty silly, sometimes stupid questions. But thankfully, in my launch there, they asked some very, very important and relevant questions, which I was hopefully happy to properly answer. So it was a great audience. That I really actually I sort of had trepidation, but as we all do, But I was very, very pleased, thanks to the audience there that night.
That's good. And of course, the moderator, Dominic, keeping everyone in line because he's you don't want to cross him.
Absolutely. He can be very tough. He was very gentle with me, but he's a good one.
He's a great guy. I admire him a lot. And he's been on the podcast before. I'd like to have him on again, too, to whip me into shape.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, Dennis, thanks so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. It offers a wealth of insight and a look into places and events that most of us can only ever, imagine. So I appreciate what you've done, and I'm looking forward to reading it. And I urge everyone else to go and read it too, because books like this really, really give a valuable insight into understanding Asia, and they're very, very much worth your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. I also were a little bit worried, what the hell are you going to ask me and all that, but it's been a very, very pleasant conversation, and we've never met, but I hope in the very near future we'll see each other face to face instead of over a telephone line.
Well, you said you got a guest house at your place, and my mama didn't raise no idiots. So every time someone offers me a guest house, I'm
You're
there.
More than welcome.
I'll let you know before I come up.
Thank you so much and good luck with all the podcasts you have done and will do in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thank you so much. Take care. Take care.
Dude, my first reaction is jealousy.
Jealousy, but also I'm kind of glad that wasn't me. Like, I don't know if I could put up with all the stuff that he did. You got to have kind of balls of steel to go through all that,
But he's got stories, man, and I like stories.
Yeah, and I always say the real point of life, obviously the real point of life, honestly, is at the end to have cool stories. And not a lot of people have as many cool stories as Dennis does, but all those things he's seen, like just imagine like the amount
the weight of those memories, right?
The weight of those memories, the stories that can just tumble out of you, which is, I guess, good why he's writing a book. But man, I think my life has been pretty eventful, but you compare it to someone like that, it's hard to comprehend almost.
Right. I guess what you want is great stories that somehow were not a threat to your life. Right.
Yeah. And war correspondents like Dennis, like they're a different breed, man.
It's just the coolest job ever. I know it's totally romanticized, and I'm sure most of the time is boredom. One of my friends described being a trial lawyer as boredom punctuated by terror.
Right, right.
Because most of the time you're sitting around waiting for something, and then you have to stand up in front of the judge. So it's So I'm sure being a foreign correspondent, it's probably a lot of boredom, traffic jams, waiting for visas, like sitting in your hotel.
Right, and then you hear an explosion, and you're like, okay, guess I got to go to the office now.
That's right.
Yeah. So really interesting, and there's a really cool guy. Not to take the attention away from Dennis, but there's a really cool guy I follow on Instagram. His name is Chris York, and he's a war correspondent in Kyiv right now in Ukraine.
Oh, wild!
He's doing some really, really cool reporting on Russia and what a fiasco this whole thing is. But yeah, man, just guys like Dennis, just balls of steel. The curiosity drives them to cover things that most people would run the other way from. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting the book and I'll get a physical copy for sure because I would like Dennis to sign that.
That's right.
Anyway, yeah, so thanks, Dennis, for coming on the show. Great conversation, and everyone remember to pick up the book at the bookstore or on Kindle or on Amazon or wherever you get books because it's going to be a fantastic read. I'm looking forward to diving in.
For sure. Thanks, Dennis.
All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we discuss to decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. This weekend, I got something for you.
Okay, brother.
I'm not sure if you've ever actually experienced this, and I don't think this happens only in Thailand. I'm sure it happens a lot of places, but I did go through it the other day, and it kind of pissed me off a little bit. But I went to buy, my son had a cough, so I went to buy some cough syrup for him. So this particular cough medicine had ephedrine in it, and that, I guess, can be used to make all kinds of crazy drugs and speed and yaba
That's right.
and whatnot.
That's right.
Yeah, so when I bought it, the pharmacist handed me a little clipboard, and I had to write down my name and phone number, like so they record who buys this stuff.
Damn, that's right.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you ever had that, but my first thought was like, no, I'm not signing nothing. Government's not getting any information on me,
Right.
Looking over the fact they probably have all the information they need anyway.
Right.
But I don't know. It kind of pissed me off. I'm buying child's cough syrup. Like I'm not going to run out and distill this into a batch of yaba to take down to Malaysia or anything,
That's right. Well, this is an interesting question. It's a good one for a poli-sci guy like me, a rule of law guy. because it gets into this question of like what is public and what is private, and of course all of us want security and safety, and we don't want drug dealers to run the country, or but then I don't want to get caught up in the net that's supposed to catch the money launderers,
Right.
So I follow a bunch of libertarian guys, because I do political ideology, and this is the kind of stuff that they're outraged, like utterly outraged about, and they want to be, they want to be off grid, and they don't want their name in any database. And I got to be honest, I'm pretty bad about this. I'm pretty much just here, take my information. Maybe I'm kind of defeated. So the only thing that pisses me off is like if I have to like sign up for a new app to do some basic thing,
right?
Like that, like I'm sick of just giving my information, just to like ride a taxi or something like that.
Right.
But
pay a parking ticket or something.
Yeah, that's right. If it's a medical situation, and in this case, it does seem like I know that I'm not a threat. I know that you're not a threat, but of course the law has applied the same to everyone. I think this would definitely be a live with. I know it's a good, well-intentioned thing, and as long as what they wanted from me wasn't a big burden, it probably wouldn't bother me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a live with on this. It's just I just find it annoying, and like this. I understand if I went in and I bought like a crate of it, but
right,
if
yeah,
I'm buying
exactly.
One 20 milliliter bottle, I think they can probably skip it. But whatever. I'll live with it.
Right. Well, I'm sure some of our listeners can relate. We've talked about the increasingly difficult banking regulations that are supposed to be anti-money laundering, but a lot of just good dudes, expats, now they can't open a bank account. So that kind of stuff I would be infuriated if I was working a real job here and I'm totally above the board guy, and now the bank won't open an account. That would be a loathe.
Yeah, I agree with that one. But for now, when I buy child's cough syrup, I would like not to sign up my details to the FDA. Thank you.
Okay. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages. Unless, of course, you're an agent who sends endless pitch emails on behalf of a client.
That's right. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. Send us a voicemail through our website that will feature on the show. Hit me up on Blue Sky. I am BKK Greg. Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure.